The sound of galloping horses echoed through the gray snow of late winter. The Colorado sky was heavy, the wind howling through the canyons like the howling of hungry wolves. Caleb stood tall in the front yard of the Monroe farm, his thick coat covered in wood dust, his hands still stained with pine tar from the morning of repairing the fence. He heard the horses in the distance, not in a hurry, not in the least surprised. All the silence of the past few days had been preparation for this moment. 4 black horses emerged from the snow, led by Jonas Reed, the man who had brought nightmares to Elena's life. His deputy badge glittered on his chest, but his eyes were no longer those of a lawkeeper, but of one who wanted to possess at all costs. Jonas pulled on the reins, the horse neighed, snow flying. He sat up straight in the saddle, his mouth curling into a cold smile. "I've come to reclaim what's mine. That woman, and the baby." In the cabin behind, Elena trembled, holding her little daughter to her chest. Her skin paled, her heart pounding. She had known this day would come, but not so soon. Fear had made her legs weak, but the crunch of wood under Caleb's boots in the yard held her back. He was still there. Caleb did not reply. He walked slowly to the porch, his dark eyes scanning each rider. Then, as if everything had been planned in advance, he bent down and pulled out a long, heavy wooden box from under the porch roof. Jonas paused. Caleb set it upright in the snow. The lid swung open, revealing a rough, wooden coffin inside. The air seemed thick. "Here," Caleb said, his voice hoarse as rock. "This is for those who despise life." A snort escaped Jonas's throat, but he could not hide the slight twitch in his eyes. He tried to keep his voice haughty. "You're trying to scare me with an empty box?" Caleb still did not blink. "Not to scare me." It was a reminder. The henchmen behind Jonas stirred. Some of them looked at each other, their eyes uneasy. The snow fell harder. The wind blew through the gaps in their coats, howling like an invisible warning. The wooden door behind them creaked. Elena stepped out. Her faded brown cloak hugged her thin body tightly. Her arms trembled, but still held the sleeping baby in the woolen blanket. Each step seemed to tear the fear that had accumulated in her over the months. Her eyes, though filled with tears, were still held high, looking straight at Jonas. "I am not your property," her voice trembled but resolute, "and this girl is not your thing." The whole yard fell silent. Jonas tightened his grip on the reins, his eyes flashing with anger. "Have you forgotten who fed you? Have you forgotten who let you stand on the stage with the men shouting at your feet? You owe me, Grace." "My name is Elena Hartfield," she interrupted, her voice surprisingly strong. "And I choose freedom." Her heart was pounding, but her chest felt like it had been stripped of its chains. Jonas blushed, half pulling his gun. The tension in the air was about to explode. But Caleb stepped forward, standing between him and Elena. No gun drawn, no threat. Just silence, his back straight as a cliff. In his hands, the wooden coffin table was still standing, cold as a prophecy. "Jonas," Caleb said softly, his voice steady as a hammer. "This child has a place to stay, this mother too. As for you, you have only 2 choices. Turn away or lie down in what I have prepared." At that moment, the wind seemed to stop. Jonas's horse neighed, taking a half step back. The henchmen looked at each other. Some of them had their hands off their guns. The silence was heavier than the sound of gunfire. From behind, Elena took a trembling step forward, standing right behind Caleb. She could feel the warmth radiating from the man who was shielding her, the solidity like roots of a 100-year-old tree rooted deep into the ground. She whispered, loud enough for him to hear, "I'm scared, but I won't hide anymore." Caleb didn't turn around. He just tilted his head slightly, as if in acknowledgement. Mabel appeared by the wooden gate, hands on hips, eyes blazing. Numa also stepped out from behind the pine trees, followed by a few townspeople. No one carried guns, just a presence. But their eyes were all on Jonas, eyes that knew the truth he had caused. That invisible pressure was like hundreds of silent spears. Jonas gritted his teeth. He wanted to give the order to fire, but his hand trembled slightly. In a brief moment, he realized the power was no longer on his side. "This is not the end," Jonas growled, then pulled on the reins. The horses turned, the snow flying. The group of people following them retreated, leaving the silent farmyard under a blanket of snow. As the sound of hooves faded, Elena fell to her knees, breathing heavily. Caleb turned around and held her shoulder. In her tear-filled eyes, she saw the image of the man who had just protected her, not with violence, but with calmness and pride. In that moment, a warm feeling flashed in Elena's chest. For a long time, she thought her heart was broken, but now, maybe those broken pieces had found a place to rest. Snow fell silently on the mountain path, like small shrouds covering the sky and earth. Elena walked unsteadily, her shoes worn out, her toes stinging with cold. Mabel held her thin arm, her old eyes flashing with determination. "Hurry, girl, you can't go back. If you hesitate, he'll find you." Elena wanted to answer, but her breath was broken in her chest. In her head, she kept hearing Jonas's sinister laugh, the rough hand that had once squeezed hers in the saloon crowd. The bruises on her wrists had not yet healed, and the baby's belly stirred, reminding her of the small creature that was suffering with her. They pushed through the white pines, their steps sinking in the thick snow. After a long, tiring mile, a glimmer of light appeared. A wooden stable stood still, thin smoke rising from the chimney. "Here we are," Mabel whispered. "Caleb Monroe. This man doesn't like to talk much, but his heart is as pure as snow." Elena stood still, her heart pounding. Months of living in fear had made her lose faith in men. The image of Jonas was always waiting to strangle her heart whenever she felt weak. The thought of entering that house was like jumping into a dark abyss. I can't," Elena trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm too broken. If he's like the others, I'll have nothing left to hold on to." Mabel squeezed her hand, her voice stern, but full of love. "Daughter, if you let the past bind you, you'll lose both the present and the child. Consider this your last chance to survive. Go in, or die out there." Elena looked up at the old wooden door in front of her. The mountain wind howled, cold to the bone, as if urging her to make a decision. She hugged her stomach tightly, mustered up all her courage, and walked towards the light coming from the crack in the door. The door opened with a creaking sound on its hinges. A tall man appeared. Caleb Monroe, shoulders as broad as a wooden wall, snow-brown hair, eyes deep under the brim of his cowboy hat. He looked at them without surprise, just silently, as if he had known this appearance. Elena instinctively stepped back, her hands clenched around the baby. Her voice came out, trembling like a naked confession. "Don't touch me. I'm broken." Caleb stood still, his breath puffing white smoke. His eyes were not searching, not pitying, not craving, just calm like the surface of a deep lake in the forest. He spoke in a low, concise voice, "Then let me take care of the broken pieces." Without another word, Caleb stepped back, opened the door wide, letting the warmth from the fireplace spread out into the cold air. Elena was stunned. It was not a sweet promise, nor an attempt to seduce. It was like a lifeline thrown into the middle of the ice, rough but sturdy. Mabel nodded slightly, then whispered in Elena's ear, "The door of life, daughter? Go." And Elena walked in. Inside, the smell of burning pine mixed with the scent of hay from the stable. Caleb took the woolen blanket from the wooden chair, draped it over her shoulders without touching her skin. He just pointed to the corner of the room, where the single bed was covered with a thick blanket, then went to add more wood to the fire. Elena sat down, her arms around her child, the warmth of the fireplace filling her trembling shoulders, gradually calming down. But in her mind, she was still alert, her heart like a little bird, always ready to flap its wings and run away. "Why? Why did you help me?" she blurted out, her voice hoarse. Caleb didn't look up. He just picked up more wood, put it on the fire, the crackling sound echoed evenly. Finally, he answered briefly, "Because no one deserves to be hunted like prey." Elena looked at him, suddenly feeling her chest tighten. In the flickering light, those calloused hands were carefully spreading the hot coals, as if every move was to keep her safe. That night, as the wind howled outside, Elena lay on the unfamiliar bed, eyes wide open, breathing raggedly. Across the room, Caleb sat leaning back in his chair, eyes half closed, his hand still holding the pistol on his lap, not to threaten her, but to block out the danger from outside. For the first time in months, Alina felt the silence of the saloon without the smell of alcohol or the obnoxious laughter. There was only the crackling of firewood and the steady breathing of the man sitting there. She closed her eyes slightly, whispering into the darkness, "Maybe I'm not dead. Maybe I still have a chance." Outside, the snow was still falling heavily, but in the small wooden room, Elena had stepped through the door of survival. And she didn't know that, from that moment on, her destiny would forever be tied to the man named Caleb Monroe. The first dawn on the Monroe farm came with the sound of a rooster and pale light through the window. Alina opened her eyes, her body still exhausted from the run and the long, tense night. The baby stirred in her arms, the small warmth making her heart clench. At least this morning they were still alive. The smell of hay and wood smoke wafted through the air. In the outer room, heavy footsteps echoed, followed by the crackling of the fire. Elena tensed, accustomed to any sound heralding a storm. The door opened, and Caleb entered, holding a wooden basin. "Warm water." He set it down near the bed, his voice hoarse but calm. "To wash your face." Elena nodded slightly, not daring to look him in the eye. Caleb asked no more questions, just quietly retreated. The silence was both a blessing and a burden. She was used to loud, commanding men. A silent man was even more difficult to predict. The work at the ranch was not easy. Caleb got up at dawn, fed the horses, cleaned the stables, checked the fences. Alina wanted to help, but her hands, accustomed to holding a glass of wine and a microphone, did not know what to do with a shovel and a bucket of water. The first time she tried to lift a bucket of hay, she almost fell against the barn wall. Caleb caught her in time, his hand lightly touching her skinny arm. Alina flinched as if burned, stammering, I can do it myself." He only glanced at her, then nodded. "Just learn gradually." There was no blame, no pity, just a simple, short sentence which confused Alina more than anything. On nights when the wind howled through the wooden roof, Alina lay holding her child, listening to Caleb walk around the barn, checking the fireplace, watering the horses. The sound was steady, like a steady heartbeat she had never known in her life. However, that peace scared her, because she knows, peace is often the most fragile thing. Even though Caleb never asked, Alina always wondered, what did he want from me? A man who was not related to her, taking care of a strange woman and a child with an unknown father. Why did he open the door without asking for anything? Or was he like Jonas, just patiently waiting until she was at her weakest? Sometimes, when she caught his eyes lingering longer, when she saw her sleeping with her child, Elena quickly turned away, her heart pounding with warning. In her head, Jonas's evil laugh echoed. "No one helps you without asking for something, Grace." However, the next day, when she returned to her room, seeing the torn shirt neatly patched and placed on the chair, Elena was silent. The stitches were clumsy, but sure. Caleb did not say a word. Then another morning, she woke up to find a kettle of boiling water on the doorstep, steam still rising. Again, no message, no knock on the door. Just quiet actions, as if he wanted her to decide whether to believe him or not. One afternoon, when the snow was falling lightly, Elena tried to water the horse. She shivered as the horse approached, its hot breath on her hand. Caleb stood a few steps away watching. She stammered, Will it kick me?" "Only if you're afraid of it," he replied, his voice calm. "Horses can sense fear." Elena bit her lip, trying to stay calm, holding out her hand. The horse lowered its head, drinking water greedily. Her hand trembled, but she didn't pull away. For a moment, she looked up, meeting Caleb's gaze. For the first time, instead of avoiding it, she held it a beat longer. There was something in those deep brown eyes, not lust, not pity, just a solid presence, like an old pine board. The feeling made Elena breathe a sigh of relief. But then, immediately, fear came. She quickly turned away, stepped back, clutching her stomach. Her heart was torn between two halves. One half wanted to believe, the other half screamed in warning. Elena often woke up in the middle of the night. The darkness reminded her of the days in the saloon, the dim lights, the rough hands pulling her off the stage. Every whistling wind sounded like a mocking laugh. She held her daughter to her chest, tears falling on her pillow. One night, Caleb knocked softly on the door. "Are you okay?" Elena quickly wiped her tears away, silent. He didn't wait for an answer, just placed a thicker blanket in front of the door, then turned away. She bit her lip, her heart aching and warm. He knew she wasn't okay, but he still respected the boundaries. Day after day, Elena learned how to make a fire, wash milk, and even practice writing a few words on the wooden board Caleb brought home. But in her heart, she still had a lingering question. Is this really a place where I can be safe? One afternoon, when Caleb went to town to buy things, Elena heard the strange sound of horse hooves outside the fence. A neighbor stopped by, looked curiously, and said half jokingly, half seriously, "Is Mr. Monroe raising a woman with a child? It's not like him at all." Those words were like a knife piercing Elena's heart. She picked up her child and hid in her room, her heart pounding in panic. The old fear came back. What if Caleb also considered her a burden, a joke? What if one day he forced her to leave? That evening, when Caleb returned, seeing her red eyes, he only asked, "What's wrong?" Elena shook her head, choking. "No, nothing." Caleb looked at her for a long time as if he wanted to say something, then just nodded slightly. "When you're ready, I'll tell you." At that moment, Elena wanted to cry and believe at the same time. But belief, to her, was still a luxury. The winter night in the Colorado mountains was so quiet that you could hear every dry pine branch falling on the snow. Elena sat by the fire, holding Lily in her blanket. Her baby's breathing was steady, her cheeks heaving with each deep sleep. Outside, the wind howled through the crack in the door. But in the small room, the bright yellow firelight made everything strangely warm. Caleb walked in, carrying a bundle of firewood. He placed it neatly by the fireplace, then sat down on a wooden chair a distance away from her. No one spoke. There was only the sound of firewood crackling, the light reflecting on the rough lines of his face. Elena could clearly feel her heartbeat. Since coming here, she had gotten used to Caleb's silence. He spoke little, but his presence was like a solid wall blocking the storm outside. That silence, instead of making her afraid, gradually brought a sense of security. She spoke softly, almost to challenge herself. Why have you never asked me about the past?" Caleb looked up, his deep brown eyes meeting hers. There was a moment of silence, then he said simply, "You just have to live in the moment." Elena bit her lip. Her hands tightened around Lily, but inside her, a fragile thread had snapped. She was surprised to realize that, for the first time in years, the tears were not from fear, but from relief. From that day on, the invisible connection between them gradually became clear. One morning, when Elena was struggling to light the fire, her trembling hands extinguished the fire. Caleb quietly came and sat next to her. He didn't say anything, just handed her a piece of dry wood and gently placed his calloused hand on her slender hand to guide her. The moment their skin touched skin made Elena pause. She looked up, met his eyes, calm, not pressing, but it was that calmness that made her heart tremble even more violently. "Like this?" Caleb said softly, his hand guiding hers to rub the fire stick. The fire flared up, the light covering both of their faces, so close that Elena could hear his slow, deep breathing. She pulled her hand back, hugging her chest tightly, but the corners of her lips curled up involuntarily. Another night, a snowstorm swept down the valley. The wind howled as if it wanted to tear the wooden roof apart. Elena tried to lull Lily to sleep, but the baby cried incessantly, the cry drowning out the wind. She staggered, carrying the child around, tears welling up in her eyes from helplessness. The door swung open. Caleb entered, his coat covered in snow. He didn't ask permission, just gently took Lily from her arms. The baby in his arms gradually calmed down, the crying fading to small sobs. Caleb rocked gently to the rhythm, his eyes fixed on the firelight. Elena stood watching, her throat choking. A big man, used to riding horses, mending fences, could hold a fragile child with such tenderness. The image was imprinted in her eyes, erasing the terrifying hauntings of previous violent hands. "Why did you do that?" she asked tremblingly. Caleb didn't look up, just whispered, "Because the baby needed peace. And because you needed it too." The answer was simple, but it pierced straight through the hard shell that had imprisoned Elena's heart. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Mabel dropped by with some bread. She sat down and urged, "Sing, Elena. You used to have a voice that would silence the entire saloon." Elena shook her head, frightened. "I've lost my voice. It only brings pain." Caleb, who was chopping wood by the stove, suddenly put down his small knife. He turned to her, his eyes quiet but firm. "If it was yours, it's yours still." Elena trembled. Mabel smiled encouragingly. In the silence, Elena softly hummed a few notes. At first, her voice was hoarse and hesitant. But when her eyes met Caleb's, sitting there, unblinking, unjudgmental, her voice gradually became fuller. The flickering fire reflected on his rosy cheeks. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the soft singing fill the room. As the last melody faded into the air, Elena realized her hands were shaking, but her heart was beating a new rhythm. The rhythm of faith. After that night, the invisible distance between them gradually shortened. Not with flowery promises, but with small details. Caleb left a neatly sewn woolen scarf on her chair. Elena secretly placed bread that Mabel gave him when he worked all day in the fields. Every evening, when Lily slept, they sat together in front of the fire, not saying much, just sharing silence. Once, Elena fell asleep in the chair. When she woke, she found a warm blanket draped over her, and Caleb sleeping by the door, like a silent night watchman. In Elena's heart, the fear was still there, but beside it, another feeling was sprouting. The feeling of being needed, respected, protected, without being imprisoned. One afternoon, as the red sun set behind the mountains, Caleb led his horse home. Elena stood on the porch, holding Lily in her arms. He looked up, his eyes accidentally meeting hers. Neither of them looked away. Instead, Elena smiled softly, the first smile she had ever given him. Caleb paused, as if frozen for a moment. The last rays of sunlight fell on the three of them, creating a rare, peaceful scene. In that moment, Elena realized her heart was no longer broken. It was beginning to piece itself back together, thanks to that silent man. Spring had just begun to blow through the Colorado mountains, melting snow to reveal patches of dark brown earth. Elena had started some flower beds on the porch. Lily was playing on the rug, giggling at the wooden ring Caleb had carved. Peaceful days followed one another, as if the darkness had left behind. But peace never lasted long. One afternoon, Caleb returned from town, his face quieter than usual. Elena immediately sensed something was different. He put down the sack of flour, avoiding her eyes. "What happened?" she asked softly. Caleb slowly replied, "People say Jonas is spreading rumors everywhere that Lily is his daughter, that she went crazy and kidnapped the child." The words were like a knife cutting straight into Elena's heart. The blood drained from her face. She shook her head repeatedly, choking. "No, that's not it. Caleb, you were there. I ran away from him to protect the child." Caleb was silent. The silence was as heavy as a rock, making Elena feel suffocated. Rumors quickly spread to every corner. When Elena went to town to buy fabric, she clearly felt the scrutiny, the malicious whispers. "There, that's her. I heard she's crazy, claiming to be someone else. I don't know if Monroe kept her because of pity or something else." Elena held Lily tighter, her head bowed as she walked. Each whisper was like a whip on her back. The climax was when a group of people came to the farm, stood outside the fence and shouted, "Give the baby back to its biological father." "Monroe, are you hiding a child thief?" Caleb stepped out, his eyes cold as steel. "This is not the place for you to judge. Go home." But when the crowd left, Elena collapsed, covering her face and sobbing. In a panic, Elena turned to Caleb, her voice breaking. "They said, you believed them? Did you think I lied too?" Caleb stood there, silent as usual, but this time the silence was no longer comforting. For Elena, it turned into an abyss. "Oh God," she whispered, tears falling. "You don't believe me either. No one believes me." She hugged Lily, ran into the room, and locked the door. Caleb stood outside, his hand on the wooden door, his lips pressed together but unable to find words. That night, Elena sat by the window, watching the snow melt into black mud, her heart broken. She dared to believe, dared to open her heart, but in the end, everything returned to the same place. Suspicion, slander, and the men's terrifying silence. The next day, when Caleb went to check the fence, Elena packed up her few belongings. She intended to leave, to run away again, so that no one would have a chance to take Lily away from her. But when she stepped out onto the porch, Lily cried softly, her small hand clutching the hem of her mother's dress. Elena looked at her child, her heart torn in two. She had no strength left. How long would she run? Was there any place safe enough for them? Tears blurred her vision, and she collapsed on the steps. Jonas's voice echoed in her head. "No one can escape me. You are just a broken woman." Elena screamed in despair, as if to fight against the whole world. "I am not crazy. I did not take my child. I just want to live." The screams broke out in the empty yard. Only the wind answered. When Caleb returned, he saw Elena sitting on the porch, holding her child, her eyes red. He approached, but she looked up, backing away like a cornered animal. "Don't come near. If you also think I'm a liar, then say it." Caleb stood still. His heart was full of words, but he couldn't get them out. He wanted to say that he believed her, that his silence wasn't doubt, but helplessness in not knowing how to soothe. But his lips were dry, and all that remained was a pained look. Elena laughed bitterly, tears welling up. "You're silent, just like all of them." She picked up Lily, turned around and walked into the house, leaving Caleb standing there frozen in the middle of the yard, his hands clenched so tightly that they bled. That night, Jonas rode through town, laughing arrogantly as he heard the rumor spread. He knew that each slander had lit a fire, burned Elena's confidence, left her alone. For him it was a sweet victory. Without using a whip, just sowing doubt, he had destroyed the security Caleb had tried to build. In her small room, Elena sat by the bed, Lily sleeping soundly under the blanket. Tears fell silently, soaking the fabric. She whispered, "If this world does not make room for us, then I will fight alone." Her heart, which was healing, was once again broken. That afternoon, dark clouds rolled over the valley, the wind stirring up dry dust. Caleb was checking the stables when the sound of hooves came crashing down, heavy as a hammer. He looked up. Jonas and 3 other men were charging into the farmhouse, cloaks billowing, guns gleaming in the gray light. Inside the house, Elena heard the rumble, her heart constricting. Lily began to cry, a cry that tore through the dense air. Fear twisted in her chest, but this time she did not hide. She took a deep breath, picked Lily up, and walked out onto the porch. "Give me back my child," Jonas screamed, his eyes bloodshot. "She took my child, dishonored my honor." Elena stood still, her whole body trembling, but her voice came out clearly. "I didn't take it. I saved my child, and I won't let you touch it again." The crowd sneered, but fell silent as Caleb stepped forward. He didn't pull out a gun, nor did he shout. Instead, he pulled a large wooden box from under the eaves, standing upright in the middle of the yard. The lid swung open. Inside was a rough wooden coffin. The air froze. "This is where those who forget the value of life end up," Caleb said, his voice booming. "Jonas, you beat, you lied, you defamed, and now you want to take this young life. You are no longer a man." Jonas growled, "You dare challenge me in front of the whole town?" "No," Caleb said calmly. "I am just reminding you." The words echoed like distant thunder. The henchmen looked at each other. Some of them bowed their heads. The wind swept by, cold. Just then, from the direction of the dirt road, Mabel appeared, followed by the midwife Numa and a few of the townspeople. They were unarmed, just standing there, their eyes on Elena and Lily. Mabel said loudly, "I saw him beat her." "We all saw," Numa added, his voice calm but cutting. "A man who spreads fear cannot be called a father." The crowd's eyes focused on Jonas, heavier than 1,000 guns. The arrogant smile on his face shattered. Elena held Lily tightly, her heart pounding, but for the first time, she did not back down. She stepped forward, standing behind Caleb, her voice trembling but determined. "You do not own me. You have never had any right to my child. From today on, we are free." Jonas tried to draw his gun. Caleb immediately blocked his way, his eyes like blades. But before the gun could be raised, one of the henchmen lowered his weapon, shaking his head. The second man backed off his horse. The invisible pressure from the gaze of the entire community made Jonas choke. Finally, he gritted his teeth and shouted, "This is not over." Then he spurred his horse away, his back bent like a fading shadow. Burst. When the sound of hooves faded, Elena fell to her knees, hugging Lily tightly. Tears welled up in her eyes, no longer from fear, but from relief. Caleb bent down, holding her shoulders. This time, she didn't back away. Her heart was trembling, but not from hiding, but from receiving. "You didn't have to shoot. You just stood there, and I knew I was protected," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Caleb looked at her, his eyes softening, his voice deep. That was the only battle worth showing Lily. Not blood, but honor. She burst into tears, resting her forehead against his chest. His steady heartbeat matched the trembling in her chest, creating a new rhythm, a rhythm of trust. The next few days, the town was quiet. The rumors were quelled, and Jonas disappeared from the area. Life went on the ranch. Caleb tended the horses, Alina learned to sow seeds, Lily babbled her first words. One morning, as the early morning sun shone through the crack in the door, Alina woke up and saw a strange object on the small table. It was a wooden ring, roughly engraved with 3 letters, E-L-C, Alina, Lily, Caleb. She picked it up, her eyes stinging. Caleb was standing outside the door, his arms crossed, his eyes not daring to look straight. He said softly, his voice hoarse, "It's not a promise of gold or silver. It's all I have, and all I want to give you." Elena stood up and walked over. She placed Lily on the bed, then approached him. Her hands were shaking as she held up the ring. "No gold or silver." Her voice choked. "I just want this piece." She slipped the ring on her finger, then took Caleb's hand and placed it on her chest, right over her racing heart. He was silent, but his eyes were moist. And when Elena looked up, he leaned down, not rushing, not forcing, just lightly touching his lips to her forehead, a kiss softer than 1,000 vows. Spring came. The flower bushes in front of the porch were in full bloom. Lily toddled on the grass. Laughter filled the yard. Elena stood at the door, her hand brushing her hair, her eyes shining. Caleb lifted Lily up high, spinning in the sunlight, his laughter blending with the mountain wind. Elena looked at that scene, her heart no longer cracked. She whispered, "I used to think I was broken, but it turns out I was just waiting for someone to put me back together. And now, we are a family." In the laughter of children and the golden sunlight, their love was acknowledged. Not by a grand wedding, but by a quiet but lasting choice, like the unchanging mountains behind them. The story of Elena and Caleb shows, hurt does not mean the end. A woman who is broken can still find a home, if there is someone who truly respects and is patient. True love does not need noise, just small actions, repeated in silence, are enough to heal the deepest wounds. And most importantly, kindness and honor are more powerful weapons than violence, because they not only protect a person, but also rekindle lost trust. From the darkness, Elena found the light again. From broken, she became whole. And their love proves that, sometimes, happiness is simply daring to choose to stay together.